ruler fits in.
That's amazing, Mark. Thank you so much. And interesting too, just thinking about the number of bicycles that I've seen just in the last few weeks going up and down my street. It's certainly one really surprising manifestation of the changes that we're seeing and the shifts in the digital to physical world.
Definitely, definitely. No, I think, in fact, unfortunately and sadly, I think we're going to come out of this in a very different new world. And part of that, I think there will be, very immediate learnings, repercussions, and results. I'm hoping, obviously, as being part of the two-wheel category space, that it's going to grow that sector and also really make people look at it in a very different light now. In terms of what it gives back to both physical fitness, community, togetherness, remove congestion and so on. I think there are so many positive virtues at the moment. Unfortunately, per what's going on in the world with lockdown, my entire community has been put indoors on a virtual environment, which has been very a big learning curve, but also interesting and fun how people and we all adapt. Yeah, I think you're right. Interesting that you noticed that in the middle of the city. There's a lot more activity in the space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start a little bit with one of the questions that I think is really on everybody's lips. What we're seeing is, retail's always been more than just a place of transaction. It's a really powerful channel for discovery and connection. And both of you have been really involved in experiential marketing. So historically, what we see in times of uncertainty, people have always found comfort and pleasure in retail, and the experience of shopping. Retail therapy has been part of our vernacular for years, and an important element of culture, as well as a means of coping with stress. But now, for the first time ever, retail stores are often being associated with feelings of risk and anxiety and even grief. So let's kind of start with one of the big questions. Mick, how do you think that retail can recover from the coronavirus crisis? And do you think that people will ever return to physical retail? And if so, what will that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and like you said, everyone's thinking about this. I think that there's actually a couple answers and a couple stages to the answers. Yeah, what's funny is several of us have been talking recently, last couple of days, about this, and that there's probably even going to be, when we get the clearance, there's probably going to be a rush to restaurants and retail. Unfortunately, we don't know what restaurants and retail will be open. I think that's one of the concerning things is the uncertainty of what's out there. And one of the other things I heard recently was that brands are having to start thinking in three kind of buckets. So about stop, still, start. What are the things they have to stop immediately? What are the things that they have to keep on doing, still do? And what are new things that they have to do to adapt to this change? And so it isn't just what's the future of retail, it's really like, what are the aspects of retail that weren't working? It could be a density discussion, and not even necessarily the number of people that are coming through the doors, but just the layout and the perception of density, I think is something to do with it too. A lot of the things we've learned in such a short time is that it isn't even necessarily the number of people. It's what we do with our hands, right? In that space. And so the perception of density helps us with that as well. It alleviates that. And so I think thinking about solutions from those three buckets of stop, still, start is really important. And I think brands are starting to already, they've done the stop. Maybe Macy's announced today they're furloughing 120,000 people or something globally. It's a crazy number. I could have that number off. But what retail will be around is a big part of it. And then the last bucket, that what do they need to do to start? I think that's something that they are already looking at. I mean, I've had conversations with a few companies already about, like, what is this looking like? How does store design react to this? What's funny is the initial reaction was digital. How do we get our digital to augment this? But there are a lot of discussions already happening about what are the mechanisms for change and perceived change, and how do we get people in the door to let them understand that we're listening to them and adapting to this. It could be longer hours, so you spread the retail out. And there's even, some chains are doing the limited the door count, so it's one in for every one out for groceries, and I think that model might happen as well with retail. You're gonna see a change in the number of people in large offerings, and again, those that can survive the boutique offerings that do survive this horrible downturn right now. You may see that the traffic in a small Buck Mason is actually great because they're an intimate little store that only holds 4 people, 5 people. For those that know brands like that, and maybe that's becomes more of a norm, smaller experiential moments.
Interesting. I think it's really fascinating, particularly what you said about the way we use our hands, because retail has always been such a tactile first experience. And, touching the merchandise is one of the key experiential elements that we've always had in retail. And we've relied upon, as I always like to say, for the past 500 years, maybe more. It'll be really interesting to see, as you say, if now that we're shifting away from jazz hands, if there will be an increase in more visual communications, and if we'll learn to rely on our eyes more than our hands, almost like a new language. Just kind of jumping off from there, Mark, I think something I'd love to talk to you about is, this sense that almost overnight we've seen a nearly unimaginable shift from a world that was primarily physical to a primarily digital world. And, as Mick was even saying, that's where a lot of people initially put their focus. But now more than ever, do you feel that it's essential for brands to think beyond the box and think beyond the shelf? And in what ways do you see the role of physical stores evolving to meet this new retail reality?
That's a big question. It's, Alyssa, it's a very big retail question. I'm not sure one that we can really fully answer at this time. I think, looking at the ladder of answers that you could really respond to that, I thought about the question as we were going to this, and I think it's going to be the world in which we arrive at post this current situation is going to be transformational. And Mick, unfortunately, your number there you just quoted was absolutely spot on. I read exactly the same article with Macy's and 140, 1,000 job losses, just in one hit with one brand, and that's gonna carry on going. So how and what the landscape looks like in the future, I don't think anybody has an honest answer. I think the reality of 2 in, 2 out kind of adopting that is going to obviously be detrimental from a revenue perspective, and the reality of that just isn't going to be feasible for many businesses that have scaled up and rely on foot traffic. So I just took a stab at this, and I thought, where and well will things change? And I looked at it through the frames of tech experiences, and in fact old school. And I think we can learn a lot of lessons from the past, and I'll come to that last. But the tech piece of the puzzle, it's interesting looking at what has been adopted, used, what was introduced some years ago, but didn't really take off. I think I used in the original PSFK panel, Prada being one of the innovators in terms of the avatar mirror. You could go in, try your clothes on, see what they look like. Now there are products and brands like Swivel that allow you to do that at home. I think Memory Mirror, there's a few other of those brands, and I think there's an obvious trajectory for that type of technology, and that allows you to virtually try on, see what you feel like. I think to your point on the tactility piece, I'm 100%, you know, that's my background. That's what Ruler's about. It's about physically touching and getting out and there doing it. So I'm afraid, you know, we're under the, you know, we're on the back foot in that perspective. But I think the tech play, there are those sort of products that allow an opportunity for brands that may not have been adopting them to the most optimum levels at this point. And I think they're going to be redeployed and re-explored. The experiences part, I think, is absolutely key to the future. And I think that can be done in a few ways. Now, what we do at Ruler is just a live day-to-day example of that. We're bringing together a community. We're trying them out on best product. We're going out on our rides. They see what the Pinarello looks and feels like. You know, that to me is the win-win for everybody involved. And I think those experiences are going to be happening on a smaller, more bespoke level. And that leads me into the sort of the old school aspect, because I think if you go back to the 70s, 80s and TV and 4 channels, just think of the cookery program.
Right.
So there you are with, you know, one host, you're out there virtually, you know, how are people buying those ingredients, looking at those recipes? And I think that methodology and that delivery mechanism can be used across many different environments and business sectors. So I think, you know, sometimes let's learn from the past and, you know, redeploy those learnings in more efficient and creative ways for the future.
I think that's really interesting, particularly, you know, in what you're saying about learning from the past and deploying that to create new roads for the future, new ways of behavior for the future. One of the things I wonder about is about consumers' expectations and whether consumers' expectations of retail have changed. Do either of you feel that there'll be more of a shift to people looking to digital first as their approach, or will they expect just a more seamless, more thoughtful, perhaps omni-channel experience?
I mean, I'll take that one. I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good question. You know, you began with talking about retail therapy, and I think that there's a part of that that is not only true but will be missed. You know, this idea of the just browse. I think in the short term, you probably will see an increase of the research, digital research being done, even on the products that you used to just go browse for. What I do think is interesting is that there might be an opportunity for brands like Neighborhood Goods and Showfields, where it's a curated experience with a smaller product set, Beta or their new clothing offering that they're doing on Melrose. You know, those kinds of opportunities could be really interesting, because you could not only curate a smaller amount of goods for trial, but you could find out what are the products that people really do need to still touch and feel, and have a very specific way of them to do that, like Showfields is doing, for example, where they could, to the best of their ability, keep it a safe, clean environment that is managed well, the flow of people. And so again, I guess where I'm going with that is, you could really figure out what are the products that people still need to, as Mark said, still really, it's tactile. Some products are really important in that way, and others that can be more digital play will probably remain that way. And then one last thing is, you wonder if the brands that started that way, like Warby Parker, and then exploded into retail, might pull back in and become, you know, we'll send you 5 pairs of glasses, you try them on and send them back. You can be assured that they're all clean, and, you know, enjoy them, try them out, and send back the ones you don't want. We might see more of that as well. So I think it depends on the product.
I think that's really interesting, because if I hear you correctly, what I'm kind of hearing is that retail needs to be to begin to be more intentional and more proactive, as opposed to, you know, we've had the luxury of being reactive for the last 500 years. And in a sense too, I feel like what you're saying could open up the possibilities for the importance of data, because in order to be predictive, we'll need to be thinking about how retail can be a gathering place for data, and a place where we learn more about customers' expectations in real time, and are able to deploy that locally. I think that that's so interesting because even now, as we're seeing in grocery, large grocery and big box stores, whether you have the kind of upscale, very highly curated experience like you would have with Whole Foods Market versus the kind of more broad-based experience that you might have at Costco, both are being successful with their supply chain because both have an enormous amount of data at their fingertips, and are able to therefore predictively understand who's going to be in the stores and when. Yeah, I think that that's extraordinary what you said there. Wow, the time is really, really flying. So I'm just gonna open up our Q&A and see if we have anything here in our Q&A. Not too many questions just yet. So then let me jump back here and say, thinking about as marketers and consumers and just this whole idea of being adaptive to changing times and changing ways. We're seeing so many shifts in consumers' behavior and shopper behavior, but as we've all said, the long-term outlook is so unknown. Can either of you, maybe you'd like to start, and then Mark, if you come in after, describe what you think is retail's new normal. What's the picture that we're looking for the new normal? And do you think that shoppers' relationships with brands has changed forever?
I think in the short term, we feel like it's changed forever, but I really think that there are some brands that have already shown in this crisis that they can step up and do what's right for their employees and do as best as they can in maintaining some sort of brand presence and stuff. I think what's interesting, if you look back to what Mark was saying when we were on stage just not so long ago talking about brands, I mentioned Nike's diversity of their portfolio in retail, from the House of Innovation to the giant flagships to the little Nike by Melrose neighborhood stores. And I think what's interesting is you might see that flip. You might see more. There's only one Nike neighborhood store, the one on Melrose, in the world. You might see that become the new norm. You might see brands that are still heavy in DTC and successful, like you say, in a supply chain and distribution network, really create a more smaller community-based store where they can really cater to a smaller network where they know their people. And I talked about this then, but that Nike store on Melrose is really an intimate offering. And because of that, they know their constituents. They know who's coming in to shop. They know them by first name. They promote all the local athletes and classes. And so you can go find out where's the best yoga, where's the best hot yoga, whatever. Yeah. And so I think the brands that can pivot and adjust to this new normal, I think will thrive, and those that maybe try to stay the course will possibly falter. I mean, they really need to be looking at where all the possibilities, I think, right now. Mark?
Yeah, listen, I wholly agree, Mick. And I love the Nike example. I'm a big fan of what they've been doing and the diversity you talked to, a few weeks back. I think I'll pick up on the technology piece again. I think we're going to be facing a period of time where, it's not going to be an overnight rush. I think you mentioned earlier, rush back into the restaurants and the retail stores. I think people are going to be sociologically very wary for the months to come. And I think, it's going to be a gradual comeback. So I fear for both the economy and the restaurants and those guys, is not going to be a flick of a switch, as I think we all know. And just a couple of brands coming back to the tech and the consumer interaction per Alyssa's original question. I think again, look back to some of the brands that I would never have bought a pair of shoes online, enter my life Zappos, and think of how they benefited and succeeded through absolutely perfect customer service, feedback response, return them, the delivery methodology, the sizing application, that they put all of their budget behind customer service, and they've succeeded as a result. And I think a lot of the companies that haven't pushed that part of their business cycle, I think, would be refocusing that energy. And then it was interesting just to look at the brands that have really reacted in sort of lightning speed. I think it was this morning or yesterday, I just saw, the latest TV spot from Chevy, who are now talking about buying a product online. You don't even have to go to the showroom, have it delivered at home. So I just wonder, I don't think that's going to be an overnight change when you're making a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 decision at the flick of a key. But I think it's just it's a signal of what may happen in the future.
Amazing insights. Thank you both so much. I'm hearing really actually positive things about the importance of community to retail, the importance of empathy to retail, and that sense of retail still needing to be human despite whatever data and technology that we may bring to the table. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. Once again, I'm Alyssa Allen of the Integer Group here with Mick McConnell and Mark Boise. We're here as part of World Retail Innovation Week presented by PSFK. Please like and subscribe at psfk.com.
Wow.
And over to you, over to you.
Wow, that's great. I didn't even pay you to do that. Thanks everybody for joining. If you have any questions, Mick and Mark and Alyssa are pretty available online through LinkedIn and things like that. So DM them there. Thanks for joining this session. Hope to see you on some of the other sessions. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again. Namaste.